All right, guys, Rob Ferrari here, and I could tell you anyone can own a Ferrari, right? Like this. Anyone could buy one. And when I say anyone could buy one, it just takes money. And you may not have the money now, but anyone with money can buy this car. It takes a special person, and you actually have to be the right person to be able to drive it without damaging it, because it's actually pretty easy to do this car incorrectly. Now, this is probably the most reliable model of Ferrari that I would suggest buying. I wouldn't go any earlier than this, because a 355, 348, 308, 328, all of those cars, they're less reliable, so you can't really enjoy them as you would a normal car. But that doesn't mean this one, which is the first model I would suggest buying, has that ease of use that you can get out of a current model car like a 488, 458. This and the 430 do take a little bit of skill. The 430, they improved it a little bit, so it's a little bit more user-friendly. But this one, I'll show you everything that people can do wrong and why when I go somewhere, I have to write instructions for a valet or anything like that, just so that they don't screw it up. Because you could do damage to this car, and damage to this car sucks because it costs a lot of money to fix. And even like a clutch, which is probably the most difficult part of the car, will be $5,000 or $6,000 to replace, which mine is pretty much there now. And I was pretty proud of this car. I was like, look, I'm going to see, because I bought it with 12,000 miles, I'm going to see how far, as a guy who knows what he's doing, can run a 360 clutch, a factory 360 clutch. And then a couple of transporters later, that dream is over. Now this door, oh, you know what? Come on. That door handle hasn't worked in days, and it just worked. This, and when you park a convertible under a tree, you have stuff. There's a bunch of stuff that's going to be problematic for people if you've never, if you don't understand how a manual transmission works. With this car, you're sort of done. But B, the most common things you're going to run into, and this is why I have instructions, is that this has an alarm. Now this light here, which is not blinking, so the car was just unlocked, this, when the alarm is on, which it defaults to being on after a minute, the car won't start. All it will do is crank over. Now let me show you. So now the alarm is on, and all you're going to do is burn out the starter, because people will be, and they'll just sit there forever and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then if you don't know what you're doing, you lock it and you unlock it and you keep pushing buttons and everything like that. But that'll eventually, and the starters, for Ferrari to sell a car where they tell you need to replace your timing belt every 3 years or 15,000 miles, but they make a starter that can literally crank over forever, and I've never seen anyone replace a starter in a 360. I can't tell you. I think one of those doesn't make a lot of sense. But once you disable the alarm, this is how you know the alarm is off, is this light will not be blinking. You have essentially 60 seconds or so to start it. All you do, foot on the brake, turn the key, boom. So that is a pretty common one. The other problems you're going to run into, and a lot of people don't realize, is that you don't want to park this in gear. With the F1s, especially the F1s, a gated car is easier. It's got a clutch pedal. It's a little bit more like normal to most people. I wouldn't suggest a 355 F1. That was the first generation of consumer F1. This is the second generation. But you don't park it in gear. You're going to leave it in neutral. So a lot of people, they roll backwards because they don't pull the brake. And this brake is actually really good, because I was trying to just be wimpy with it and be like, let me just give it like a click or two. I always give it the extra click or so, just so it doesn't move, because if you park it on a hill or something like that, you never want to get out of your car and see your Ferrari rolling backwards. Now, this isn't something I really thought of as a common issue until my friend who bought my last car was telling me that she drove it and she went over, and then she was like rolling backwards, and it's just, she drives automatic. So she can get the hang of the shifting and everything like that, but it's still an automatic. Now that brings me to the shifting, which is probably the most common issue you're going to run into. And you see, look, we're on. If you don't know what you're doing, and I guess I can sort of screw the clutch up a little bit now because it's already screwed, you can screw up the car just by, when you put it in first gear, if you're on a hill, the clutch doesn't engage. Like, see, you just give it a little bit of gas until it engages, not engaged, not engaged, not engaged. That was engaged, but I'm gonna run into a dumpster. But if you do it wrong, you're gonna run into an issue where all you do is sort of spin the clutch. So if you have a heavy foot and you're not delicate with the throttle, you're gonna run into a situation that's gonna look something like this, which is just like, oh, I wanna go forward. This is an automatic, let me get up there. And the clutch just spins up to like 4,000 RPM. All you're doing at that point in time is spinning clutch. It's not engaged. It's just a computer controlled clutch. You have to understand why you're shifting gears. And that's a common thing that most people don't get. And you don't really have to get it with the 458s and the 488s. But if you don't understand why you shift gears, this is not the right car for you. So the other thing people love to break is this little T-handle here, which is even loose. Mine was never loose. When I got it, I was like, wow, whoever owned this car knew what they were doing. In the rental car world, I had so many of these. This handle was always broken. You could just flop it back because given enough force, you can make that handle break. But you have to lift it up and pull it back to put it in reverse, right? And most people don't get that. Most people just, it's not going into reverse, and they just monster that thing back, and that results in an issue. But I mean, as I said, this clutch is pretty much done anyway. Let me show you another thing people tend to screw up is the top, because the top is a little finicky, right? So there's a one button top here. You do this, and this is gonna close it. But sometimes it's just, there's so many different sensors on it, sometimes it just doesn't wanna close, right? It'll get stuck like here, or the top won't start coming out because it doesn't have enough pressure built up, and they'll just keep holding the button until they burn something out. And if you burn out the pump for the top, that worked actually very sweetingly. If you burn out the thing for the top, then that's gonna cost you a lot of money. So there's so many things that if you just don't realize that the car doesn't just operate itself, right? You gotta be gentle with it, and you gotta understand what it does, what makes it work, what doesn't make it work, and you gotta sort of work with it. So it's really like a car guy's Ferrari. And you could say that about any car, but like there's cars like, all right, you gotta turn the fuel pump on before you do this, and there's always some sort of level of expertise required. But this one is, the fact that it's got the paddle shift in it, it makes people think it's an automatic, and it's not. Going up an incline especially, which is why transporters kill this car, they either, and why they say, oh, it's out of gas, not out of gas, push the button. Like I know all, especially being in the rental game for so long, I know all the answers to the like, I'm having this issue, and the answer is always like, turn the alarm off or whatever. The clutch overheating is a common problem because people don't know how to drive it in traffic. You can't just drive this like an automatic. If you drive it like an automatic, you're gonna roast the clutch. And when we were renting these out, we'd see anywhere between, and maybe as little as 5, but the average was probably 10 to 15,000 miles on a clutch, which is not a lot. This car's got almost 25,000 on it already, but after a couple of trips where it's had to go on transporters, and it's like, when a transporter calls me up, I try to make it the last car in the truck so it's got the least incline and everything. But when they tell me it's like, oh, now we got to unload it and then reload it, I'm like, this thing's done. And it always comes back smelling like clutch because I don't really know what they're doing. And ultimately what ends up happening is like, you'd say, Rob, why wouldn't you just go out and put it on an enclosed transporter? It's got the lift gates. It's not worth the extra money because that's going to be an extra $1,000 every time I transport it. So an extra $2,000 every trip, which means it's costing me an extra $10,000, but it's saving me, a $5,000 clutch. I'd rather just let the inevitable happen. The last stuff you have to know, which is not necessarily specific to this car, but this car does not have a lift system, is that it's low in the front. So if you don't know what you're doing, and ignore my rock chips, you may end up pulling into a parking stump in the front or in the back. You may find yourself backing too close up to a parking stump or something and contacting the lower diffuser here, which mine is not damaged, or even either of the curbs there. And this, because it's such a short back from the back of the tires, doesn't seem to have that problem as much as some of the other cars with a longer back, but ultimately That is a fairly common problem. So those are all the tips and tricks as to, like, if you want to feel like an expert or look like an expert when you get into a 360. Every time I pull it to a valet, it's the same thing. Oh, you know how to do this? I got this. I'm like, you want me to tell you just in case? And even when you tell them, you go inside and you look outside, and 5 minutes later, the guys are still fudging around with the car trying to figure out how to make it move. Or they leave it where it is, or they pull it up a couple of feet and it ends up living in front of the restaurant. And it's just that it's a little bit far removed, that it's not a common car to see. I mean, it's still a common-ish Ferrari, but it's not a common car for like valets and people to see. It's more the Californias and the Portofinos and the 458s, 488s that ended up getting valeted. The older ones, the early 2000s cars, the late 90s cars, are the ones that do require a little bit of experience and a little bit of knowledge to be able to operate properly. And if you don't operate them properly, everything's expensive. That reverse lever, expensive. And even that reverse lever, once you break that gate, sometimes like on a bumpy road, it'll think you're trying to put it in reverse and it'll confuse the car and throw you into neutral and beep at you while you're driving. So that's something you're gonna have to fix. The clutch, obviously, you'll have to fix. That's $5,000, that's $1,000. The door handle jiggle, like, if you don't understand, like my door handle stopped working and you like pull it like literally 20 times, it won't open. There's a way that if you just play with the key, if you lock it and unlock it and jiggle the handle, eventually it finds its way back into whatever is loose in there that's causing that issue. Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on most of the easy things that people will do wrong. If I'm missing something, throw it in the comments. I'll definitely pin it to the top. But other than drivability and the way to drive it, the operation of the top, the operation of the reverse lever, and then the clearance issues on the front and the back and the alarm, I think I got everything. So it's just as easy as that. You may notice in the background my siding is here, but my guy is not. It's been over a month. So if you happen to know a siding guy who can, you know, I'm in a tough spot with the siding now, because the amount of money I've given the guy already that's supposed to do the siding, I can't get anyone else to do the siding for that job, for that price now. So I'm sort of stuck into this guy because I've overpaid him so far, or I got to burn the Delta. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'll keep you in the loop on that. The house update's coming up soon. But as far as this car goes, I'm enjoying it. It's one of those things that I know how to drive it. My wife knows how to drive it. It's something that virtually anyone can drive, even my friend Nadia, who bought the other one. Her and her husband are enjoying it because it's a great car. It's got these little quirks that you have to understand, because not anyone can drive it. Anyone can buy it, but not anyone can drive it. Rob Ferretti, thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. When you jump into 360 next time, you can just be like, I got this. And then you pull up the video real quick, check it out, and then you got that. See you next time. All right, thanks for watching the whole video. You know my other company, Adventure Drives. Well, we've got 3 drives coming up this year. We're doing a DC to Nashville drive through Tail of the Dragon, through the Smoky Mountains, drinking some moonshine. That's going to be a great time. That's in the end of April. Interested in something longer? Well, we're going to go to France and Spain for our European drive this summer. That's going to be in the first week of August. And Scotland, which you've heard so much about, will again be this coming October. So check them out, adventuredrives.com. There's a link below in the description.